Relations between the United States and Russia appear to have reached a new low this week. U.S. President Barack Obama canceled a summit with Russian leader Vladimir Putin just days after Moscow granted American security leaker Edward Snowden asylum. But some believe the Snowden affair is just a pretext for canceling next month's meeting, as it wouldn't have resulted in any significant breakthroughs. CCTV's Anya Ardayeva has this report.
A Kremlin official here says Russia had no choice but to offer asylum to Edward Snowden. He's been stuck in the transit area of Moscow's international airport for more than a month. His passport was invalid, and Russian officials say they could not simply turn him over to the US as there is no extradition agreement. Russian President's top foreign policy aide Yuri Ushakov says for many years Americans have, quote, avoided signing an extradition agreement. He says Washington has repeatedly responded negatively to Russian requests for extradition of people who committed crimes on Russian territory, pointing to the absence of such an agreement. Ushakov said the decision to cancel the summit reflected America's inability to develop an equal relationship with Russia, adding that the Kremlin's invitation to the US president still stands. Further observers here in Moscow say that during the summit, the two leaders were not likely to make any progress on a number of pending issues anyway. These issues include missile defense, Iran, Syria, and human rights.
Possibly, if that meeting were not cancelled, possibly Obama would raise the question of Syria, and we know that Russia is not yielding on that. Possibly Putin would raise the issue of missile defense. And as we know, Obama would not yield on that.
The White House said U.S. relations with Russia cannot be seen as black and white, as the two countries have made some progress in economic areas and on Afghanistan. The summit cancellation comes amid Russia's resistance to the Americans' desire for deeper cuts in nuclear weapons and to U.S. backing of Syrian rebels. Following his decision to cancel the bilateral summit in Moscow, Barack Obama has added a two-day visit to Sweden. And even though the U.S. president's trip to Russia has been cut short, he will still attend a G20 meeting of world leaders in St. Petersburg in early September. Anya Ardayeva, CCTV, Moscow.
For more on the status of U.S.-Russia relations, we're joined by Professor Stephen Fish, a political scientist from the University of California at Berkeley. And thanks for joining us, Stephen. What kind of message do you think President Obama is sending by canceling this meeting with President Putin next month?
Well, clearly he's sending a message of great displeasure. This is a sign that really a symbolic gesture showing that he's very displeased with the way things are going in relations with Russia.
Well, I want to get your take on a recent interview that President Obama had with American talk show host Jay Leno. President Obama said Russia sometimes slipped back into the Cold War mentality. I'd like you to listen in for the next minute or so and then get your thoughts on the other side.
Even though we don't have an extradition treaty with them, traditionally we have tried to respect if there's a lawbreaker or an alleged lawbreaker in their country. We evaluate it and we try to work with them. They didn't do that with us, and in some ways it's reflective of some underlying challenges that we've had with Russia lately. Right. There have been times where they slip back into Cold War thinking and a Cold War mentality.
Do you think those words were too harsh, or is this simply just for show?
I think he really means it, and I don't think they're necessarily too harsh. But I think it's important to remember that the United States sometimes slips into a Cold War mentality too. President Putin is responding in part to the fact that the United States has been engaging in some spying on him personally, and that was in contradiction to all international norms about how you actually carry on relations with other countries and with the heads of states in other countries. So I mean, this is true what he said about Russia falling back into a Cold War mentality, but unfortunately the United States says the same thing.
So what is Russia's next move? Because we're hearing from President Obama. Will Russia respond?
Well, it's not clear. Certainly Russia's not going to do anything. Putin's not going to do anything that could make him look weak. The Russians are obsessed with respect in the international system. They always want to be treated as an equal with the United States and be treated by the United States as an equal. This has been an obsession for the Russians throughout the entire Soviet period and indeed in the post-Soviet period. So it's hard to say how President Putin is going to respond, but we can we can be sure that he's not going to respond in a way that shows any weakness.
I also wanted to get your take on what U.S. Senator John McCain said recently, and I'm quoting here. We obviously agree with President Obama's decision to cancel his planned meeting with President Putin in Moscow, but now we must move beyond symbolic acts and take the steps necessary to establish a more realistic approach to our relations with Russia. That means demonstrating to the Russian government that there will be consequences for its continued actions that undermine American national interests. What do you say about Senator McCain's words?
Well, Senator McCain for a long time has been very tough on Russia. He's been disillusioned with Russia ever since the late Yeltsin period. He had high hopes, as many people did, of course, for rapid, robust democratization in Russia. That has not happened. He's been a fan of a much tougher line on Russia for many years. And so what he wants President Obama to do is really to move toward a much harder stance on Russia. I don't see President Obama doing that. He does not share Senator McCain's view of the U.S.-Russia relationship. He has a much more nuanced, much more fingertip feel for the relationship than Senator McCain does. I actually don't see this move as indicating any major deterioration in U.S.-Russia relations. They're rocky now. They've been rocky for a long time. The United States and Russia will always be rivals in the international system. But there's an awful lot that unites the United States and Russia in terms of common interests: fighting terrorism, energy and the economy, nuclear arms control. These are the really big interests that the United States have and in Russia have in common, and that's not going to change. President Putin and President Obama are really pragmatic when it comes to this relationship, and I think that that's going to carry things through.
All right, Stephen Fish from UC Berkeley, we appreciate your time and your insight.